remember that night clearly, the night my husband, Daniel Cross, decided to host a grand charity gala in our mansion. It was supposed to be a night of kindness, elegance, and gratitude, a gathering where the wealthy came together to give back. At least that's what they claimed. The invitations were printed in gold, the guest list filled with names that made headlines: politicians, socialites, CEOs, the kind of people who smiled for cameras and spoke about generosity while clutching their designer handbags a little too tightly. But I knew better. Behind every smile, every sparkling champagne glass, and every graceful compliment, there was always a shadow, a whisper of pride, envy, and hidden motives. Some came to be seen. Some came to gossip. And a few came simply to prove they belonged among the powerful. As I watched the decorators hang crystal chandeliers and the staff polish marble floors until they gleamed, something in me stirred a quiet question that refused to fade. Who among these people truly had a heart, and who only bowed to money? I wanted to know the truth. Not the polite, well-rehearsed version they showed in public, but the one that slipped out in moments of arrogance, the kind that revealed what a person was really made of. That night, I didn't just want to host a gala. I wanted to test humanity behind the mask of wealth. Because money can buy class, but it can't buy character. And deep down, I knew before the night was over, the masks would fall. Someone would show me exactly who they were when they thought no one important was watching. Little did they know, the woman polishing glasses in the corner wasn't a maid at all. She was the billionaire's wife, and she had come to see their true faces. Before we continue, let me ask you this. Have you ever been judged because you looked less important? Remember, sometimes life disguises queens as maids not to hide them, but to reveal who the real servants of kindness are. If you love stories that remind the world never to judge by appearances, hit subscribe, and stay tuned for the next story that will change how you see people forever. Our mansion, Cross Estate, stood like a diamond against the skyline, tall marble pillars rising into the night, glass walls catching every flicker of city light, and a grand staircase that seemed to touch heaven itself. Before you scroll away, let me ask you this. Have you ever judged someone by what they wore, how they looked, or where they worked, only to realize later they were far more than you imagined? Sometimes life uses the humble to teach the mighty. Sometimes the ones we overlook are the very souls carrying lessons we didn't know we needed. If this story touched your heart, remind someone today kindness costs nothing, but it changes everything. Don't forget to subscribe for more stories that awaken your heart, challenge your thoughts, and remind you that grace is still powerful. Drop a comment below. What would you have done if you were in Amelia's shoes? And remember, true power isn't in revenge, it's in forgiveness. From the outside, it was breathtaking. The kind of place people slowed their cars to stare at, a symbol of success, of power, of everything people thought they wanted. Every inch of it was perfection, Daniel's perfection. He didn't just build the mansion, he built an empire. The Cross Foundation was known in every corner of the world: luxury real estate, clean energy, and cutting-edge technology. People whispered his name in the same tone they reserved for myths, the man who turned nothing into everything. And I was the quiet woman beside him. To the world, I was Mrs. Cross, the beautiful wife, the arm candy in designer gowns, the woman who smiled at galas and waved from private jets. But behind that image, there was another story, one that no one ever asked to hear. No one cared to know what kind of woman I truly was, what dreams I had before the diamonds, what scars I carried beneath the silk. To them, I was a shadow in Daniel's light, seen but not truly seen. Sometimes, when the mansion grew too quiet, I'd walk through its endless halls and wonder, if I had nothing, no name, no title, no fortune, would anyone still greet me with the same warmth? Would they offer me champagne or hand me a broom? It was a haunting thought, one that followed me like a ghost through the glitter. People claimed to love me, but did they love me, or the reflection of wealth in my eyes? That question burned inside me, quietly but relentlessly. I wanted to know the truth. I needed to know if respect was something I'd earned, or something people pretended to give because of who stood beside me. And that's when the idea took root: dangerous, thrilling, and impossible to ignore. A test? A test of hearts, not wallets. I would strip away everything that made them bow: the diamonds, the gowns, the name. I would stand before them as no one and see if anyone still saw a woman worth respect. The thought sent a strange excitement through me, part fear, part freedom. Because deep down, I believed something few in that world ever dared to think. Money can buy a mansion, but it can never buy the soul that lives inside it. And before the next sunrise, I knew I would risk everything to prove it. The thought came to me a week before the gala. It was one of those golden evenings when the world feels almost too perfect to be real. The sunset stretched across the horizon in burning shades of orange and rose, painting the marble balcony in a soft, fading glow. Below, the city hummed alive, restless, unaware of the secret that was about to be born on that balcony. Daniel joined me, as he always did, carrying 2 cups of tea. Steam curled from the porcelain like whispers of comfort. He handed me one, the way he always did, a little honey, no sugar, just how I liked it. That small detail said everything about him. Daniel was never loud about love. He didn't need grand gestures or heavy words. He showed affection in quiet, deliberate ways, a glance that lingered, a touch that reassured, a memory he never forgot. "You've been quiet all week," he said softly, taking a seat beside me. I smiled faintly. "Just thinking." "About?" The breeze brushed against my hair, carrying the scent of the garden roses below. "About the gala," I murmured, "and the people who'll come." He chuckled lightly. "Don't tell me you're worried about pleasing them. You always do." I shook my head, eyes still on the sunset. "No, Daniel, I'm not worried about pleasing them. I'm curious." He turned to look at me, a small crease forming between his brows. "Curious?" I hesitated, choosing my words carefully. "I see the way they act when you're around. Polite, kind, almost saintly. But when your back is turned, I hear the whispers. I see the smirks." Daniel leaned back, studying me in silence. The light from the setting sun danced across his face, thoughtful, a little intrigued. "And you want to test them?" I met his gaze. "Yes." A slow smile curved on his lips. "How?" "Let me come as someone else, a maid perhaps." He blinked, not in shock, but in quiet amusement. "A maid?" I nodded. "Just for one night. No one will recognize me if I keep my hair tied back. I want to see how they treat me when they think I'm no one." He was silent for a long moment, the wind whispering between us. Then he reached out, his fingers brushing mine. "Are you sure, love? They might not be kind." I smiled faintly. "That's exactly what I want to see." The evening arrived faster than I expected. By 6 o'clock, the mansion was alive, a perfect storm of movement and noise. Decorators rushed through the hallways, their arms full of golden ribbons and crystal vases. The chefs barked orders in the kitchen. The clatter of pans echoed like a heartbeat. Florists floated in and out, leaving trails of white rose petals down the marble corridor. From the ballroom came the soft hum of a violin being tuned. I could hear laughter from the staff, the faint click of heels on polished floors. Every chandelier sparkled like frozen sunlight. Every mirror had been polished to perfection. The cross estate, our home, glowed like a palace. And yet, inside me, a quiet storm brewed. In my dressing room, the air smelled of roses and Chanel No. 5. My usual gown, a silver masterpiece from Paris, hung silently on its rack, untouched. Tonight, it would remain that way. On my vanity lay a small brown package that had arrived earlier that morning. My fingers trembled slightly as I unwrapped it. Inside was a plain black maid's uniform, simple, modest, and painfully ordinary. No jewels, no silk, no lace, just fabric meant for service, not spectacle. Exactly what I needed. For a long moment, I just stared at it. My reflection in the mirror seemed almost foreign, barefaced, unadorned, vulnerable. For years, I had been Mrs. Daniel Cross, the woman everyone wanted to impress, the wife of a billionaire, the silent queen of this marble empire. But who was I without the diamonds, without the whispers of admiration that followed my name? Tonight, I was about to find out. I slipped into the uniform, feeling the cool fabric brush against my skin. My hands moved slowly, reverently, as if dressing for battle. I tied my hair into a tight bun, wiped away the last trace of lipstick, and looked at myself again. The transformation was complete. If I had passed myself in the hallway, I might not have recognized me. My eyes caught the glint of my wedding ring, a single diamond that had always symbolized everything I had. I hesitated, then slid it off and placed it gently in the drawer. No jewelry, no name, no wealth, just me and the truth waiting downstairs. Downstairs, the mansion doors opened to a flood of laughter and glittering gowns. Luxury cars lined the driveway, Rolls-Royces, Bentleys, a silver Aston Martin that gleamed like moonlight. The air was thick with perfume, money, and ego. Every guest entered as if the world were watching, heads held high, smiles painted to perfection. Diamonds flashed, glasses clinked, waiters glided across the marble floor like dancers in a silent ballet. The hum of violins floated through the ballroom, blending with polite laughter that sounded far too polished to be real. And I, the woman who once owned this very house, stood quietly near the kitchen door, holding a tray of champagne. No one looked twice. Not the men in tailored tuxedos. Not the women shimmering in sequins worth more than a year's rent. I was just another uniform in black and white, another nameless face in service. Invisible. And strangely, it felt freeing. As I moved from table to table, the world around me revealed its cracks. I heard their conversations, the kind you can only catch when people forget you exist. Money, power, politics, gossip dressed as charity. One man, with a smile too perfect to trust, bragged about donating $500,000 to the foundation, then laughed quietly, boasting that his accountant would get it all back in taxes. At another table, two women air-kissed and showered each other with compliments, only for one to whisper seconds later, "Did you see her dress? Tacky, probably last season." Everywhere I turned, masks glittered brighter than the jewels. That's when it hit me. They hadn't come to give. They had come to be seen giving. And I, the invisible maid, was the only one seeing the truth. For the first time that night, I felt a strange, dangerous satisfaction rise within me. I wasn't just serving drinks. I was watching them, and they had no idea. Then I saw her. Vanessa Hale, the woman who could silence a room simply by entering it. Every head turned when she walked in, as though gravity itself bent around her presence. She was tall, graceful, and draped in a red gown that shimmered with sequins, catching every flicker of light like liquid fire. It wasn't just a dress. It was a statement, bold, commanding, unapologetically seductive. Her makeup was immaculate, cheekbones carved by precision, lips painted a daring crimson that dared anyone to look away. Her perfume, something expensive and dangerously sweet, lingered in the air long after she passed. And her smile, oh, that smile. Polished. Perfect. But I'd seen smiles like that before, the kind that never reached the eyes. She didn't walk into the room, she claimed it. The conversations dimmed around her as though the world itself paused to make space for her entrance. Even the music seemed to soften, allowing her heels to echo down the marble floor like the rhythm of power. Vanessa Hale, the name I had seen in headlines and charity magazines, a woman who built an empire from designer heels and ruthless ambition, recently divorced. Whispers followed her like shadows. She's targeting Daniel Cross next, they said. Strictly business, of course, but everyone knew better. And now here she was, at our gala, my husband's gala, glowing with the kind of confidence that comes from knowing everyone's watching. But she didn't know me. To her, I was no one. A maid in black. A servant carrying glasses of champagne in silence. And somehow, that made her bolder. I caught her gaze for a fleeting second. She didn't even blink. Her eyes skimmed over me the way one looks at furniture. A flicker of disdain, then gone. She turned her attention to Daniel, my Daniel, who was just stepping into the ballroom, greeting guests with his usual calm authority. Vanessa's smile widened, softening into something almost tender. She leaned toward one of her friends and whispered something that made them both laugh. I didn't need to hear the words. I could feel them. The way her eyes lingered on him, admiring, measuring, claiming. It was strange, standing there in my disguise, watching her circle the man who had built the life I lived. If she only knew. If she only knew who the quiet maid by the kitchen door really was. But that was the point, wasn't it? To see the truth without the veil of wealth, without the armor of my name. Vanessa Hale represented everything I wanted to uncover: beauty, power, and the arrogance that came with both. And as her laughter rang through the ballroom, echoing like the chime of crystal against silver, I made a silent promise. Before the night was over, she would show me exactly who she truly was. And I, the invisible maid, would be watching every move. I approached her table, the silver tray trembling faintly in my hands, not from fear, but from restraint. Vanessa sat in the center of attention like a queen surrounded by courtiers. Her red gown glowed beneath the chandelier's golden light, the sequins throwing tiny sparks across the marble floor. Around her, laughter rippled softly, every sound rehearsed, every smile directed her way. Daniel was across the room, deep in conversation with a cluster of investors. He had that calm confidence that drew people in, the kind of presence that didn't need volume to command respect. Vanessa's gaze never left him. Her hand rested lazily on her glass, fingers adorned with diamonds sharp enough to cut glass. I stepped closer, lowering my head slightly. "Champagne, ma'am?" She turned sharply, her perfume washing over me, sweet, bold, suffocating. Her eyes swept over me slowly, deliberately, like a queen assessing an unworthy servant. "You," she said, her tone dripping with disdain. "Don't hover. If I need something, I'll ask." I bowed my head quickly, forcing my voice to stay soft. "Yes, ma'am." But as I turned to leave, her voice sliced through the air again. "And tell the chef," she added, "the caviar tastes cheap." Her friend beside her laughed, a polite, knowing chuckle. "Vanessa, you're impossible." Vanessa tilted her head, swirling her glass with lazy arrogance. "Please," she said with a smirk. "If I wanted ordinary food, I'd stay home." The table erupted in small, synchronized laughter, the kind that wasn't funny but was performed to please. I smiled faintly, keeping my head down, even as my heart thudded in quiet defiance. They didn't know the chef she mocked was flown in from Paris, or that every dish she ridiculed had been handpicked by Daniel himself, down to the last garnish. It wasn't about flavor. It was about power. And tonight I had unknowingly walked into Vanessa Hale's favorite sport domination. I could feel her eyes on me as I walked away, the weight of her smugness pressing against my back. She wanted a reaction, that flicker of humiliation, that slip in composure that proved her superiority. But she wouldn't get it. Not tonight. As I disappeared into the crowd of servants, one truth echoed in my mind. She thought I was beneath her. And soon enough, she'd learn exactly how wrong she was. The night deepened, and so did the masks. Laughter floated through the ballroom like music light, elegant and utterly fake. The kind of laughter that hides secrets behind every sparkle. From my quiet post near the pillars, I watched it all unfold, the glittering crowd, the polished manners, the delicate web of deceit woven through every toast and every smile. Every conversation had two meanings, one spoken, one hidden. I saw it in the way a man praised Daniel's remarkable business ethics, while subtly boasting about his own fortune. I heard it in the way women complimented each other's dresses, only to whisper cruel comments the moment their backs were turned. They called it society, I called it performance. And through it all, Daniel stood like a calm anchor, charming, gracious, unaware of the silent war playing out in the corners of the ballroom. People flocked to him like moths to a flame. Every man wanted to impress him. Every woman wanted to be seen beside him. And then there was me, the invisible observer in a maid's uniform, carrying champagne through a sea of diamonds. I heard them talk about me too, their voices sharp and careless, believing I was just another servant. "His wife never comes to these things anymore," one woman whispered. "I heard she's terribly shy." "No, darling," another replied with a smirk. "She's lucky. Imagine marrying into that fortune. Some women are just blessed." Lucky. The word sliced through me like glass. Lucky, as if love was something handed out like raffle tickets. As if years of loyalty, of late nights waiting for him to come home exhausted from boardrooms and flights, meant nothing. They didn't see the sacrifices, the trust, the partnership. They only saw the diamonds, the mansion, the name. That's when I understood why Daniel had agreed to my plan so easily. He'd always told me, "People show you who they are when they think you have nothing to offer them." Tonight, those words came alive. As I passed through the glittering hall, I saw the truth behind every polished smile, desperation wrapped in pearls, envy disguised as charm, greed hidden behind laughter, and beneath it all, the faint hum of ambition. Everyone wanted something, a favor, a deal, a photograph, a connection to the cross name. I caught Daniel's gaze for a fleeting second across the room. His eyes softened, he knew me even in disguise. A small secret smile passed between us. It steadied me. Then Vanessa's laughter rang out again, bright, sharp, and cruel. All eyes turned toward her, and I knew the night's true performance was about to begin. Because when masks begin to slip, someone always gets exposed. And tonight I had front row seats. Around midnight, Daniel took the stage. The lights softened, the chatter dimmed, and the crowd turned toward him as if drawn by an invisible thread. The orchestra quieted. All that remained was the low hum of reverence that always followed his presence. He didn't just walk onto the stage, he commanded it. "Good evening, everyone," he began, his voice rich, calm, magnetic. "Tonight isn't about wealth. It's about purpose, about using what we've built to give back to those who need it most." Every word rolled off his tongue with the effortless conviction of a man who believed what he said. That's what set Daniel apart. He didn't need to perform kindness. He lived it. From where I stood, half hidden behind the bar, I watched him with quiet pride. His words washed over the crowd like a tide, soothing, grounding, powerful. Cameras flashed, glasses lifted in admiration. He didn't need the wealth. He built everything to create impact. And that's what I loved most about him. But as his speech drew to a close, my gaze caught movement near the front of the room. Vanessa Hale. Her red gown shimmered like molten fire under the spotlights. She leaned forward in her seat, eyes locked on Daniel as if she were the only one in the room who mattered. Her lips curved into that signature smile, the kind that promised more than it should. When he stepped off the stage, the applause was thunderous. But Vanessa was faster than anyone else. She rose gracefully, gliding toward him with the precision of a predator. Her friends watched, pretending not to. Everyone knew what she was doing, and no one dared to stop her. I followed behind with a tray of champagne, keeping my head bowed but my senses sharp. "Mr. Cross," she purred, her voice low and honeyed. "You spoke beautifully, truly inspiring." Daniel offered a polite smile. "Thank you, Vanessa." Her laugh was soft, rehearsed. "I'd love to collaborate sometime. Maybe over dinner?" Her tone was sugar-sweet, her hand brushing his arm like a whisper. I nearly laughed. Daniel's expression didn't waver, calm, controlled, unreadable. But his eyes flicked briefly to mine, a subtle, knowing signal. A private exchange that spoke volumes. "Perhaps," he said evenly. "My wife and I will think about it." Vanessa froze for a fraction of a second. The mask slipped just long enough for me to see the flash of irritation in her eyes. Then, just as quickly, she recovered. Her smile returned, wider, brighter, faker. "Of course," she said smoothly. "Your wife must be wonderful. I can't wait to meet her." Daniel met her gaze, his voice low but steady. "You will," he said. "Soon." The words hung in the air, quiet but heavy. Vanessa's smile faltered again, just slightly. She didn't know it yet, but the game she was playing had already begun to turn against her. And I, the invisible maid, stood inches away, holding a tray, holding my silence, holding back a smile. Because soon, she would meet me, and she would never forget it. As the night carried on, I began to question myself. Would I have had the courage to do this if I hadn't been married to Daniel? To step into this glittering world that worshipped money and status, stripped of mine with nothing but a maid's uniform and the truth beneath it? Every tray I carried felt heavier than it should. Not because of the glasses, but because of what I now knew, what I now saw. I had spent years surrounded by these people, lunching with them, laughing with them, hosting them in our home. I had shaken their hands, smiled at their compliments, believed in their kindness. But tonight, I saw what lay behind the polish. Jealousy, pride, vanity disguised as virtue. And for the first time, I realized how fragile that world truly was. One whisper, one rumor, one misstep, and their perfect facades would shatter. I wondered, would I still be this brave if Daniel weren't mine? If I didn't have his name, his protection, his trust? Could I still walk through this hall of pretense and keep my head high as just me, the woman behind the title? The thought lingered, heavy and unkind. There was a strange kind of vulnerability in being unseen. But there was power, too. A maid could walk anywhere, hear anything, and never be noticed. Tonight, that invisibility became my armor. Still, a quiet fire began to burn inside me, the urge to reveal the truth. To lift my chin, meet Vanessa's smug stare, and say, "Careful what you mock. You're standing in my house." The words nearly escaped my lips. My hands trembled with the weight of restraint. But something, perhaps instinct, perhaps pride, whispered, "Not yet." Because sometimes, the lesson hits hardest when it arrives late. Let them laugh, let them whisper, let them believe they've won. When the truth finally unfolds, it doesn't need to shout. It simply arrives quietly, gracefully, and leaves everyone breathless. And as the music swelled and Vanessa's laughter echoed across the ballroom once more, I took a deep breath and steadied my tray. My moment wasn't now, but it was coming. And when it did, the woman in red would wish she had never noticed the maid at all. Later that night, I slipped out into the garden for air. The doors closed softly behind me, muting the music and laughter into a distant hum. The night was calm, painted in silver and shadow. Moonlight shimmered across the marble fountain, and the air carried the faint scent of jasmine. I exhaled slowly, deeply, as if releasing the noise, the judgment, the pretending. Inside that mansion, every smile had felt staged, every compliment rehearsed. But out here, It was quiet, peaceful, honest. I sank onto a stone bench, the cool surface grounding me. My reflection rippled faintly in the fountain's water, not the poised socialite everyone once admired, but a woman stripped bare of pretense. And for the first time, I wondered if this night wasn't just about exposing them. Maybe it was about exposing me. Maybe I wasn't testing their character. Maybe I was testing my own. Could I stay kind when others were cruel? Could I remain graceful when they mocked and dismissed me? Could I still see the beauty in humanity even when the ugliness stared back? It was easy to be good when the world praised you. But to be humble when no one saw your worth, that was the real test. A breeze rustled through the rose bushes beside me, and I found myself smiling softly. Somewhere inside, I knew Daniel would be watching, waiting to see how long I could hold my silence. He had once told me, power doesn't reveal who you are losing, it does. Now, sitting under the moonlight in borrowed clothes, I finally understood what he meant. I wasn't losing power tonight. I was reclaiming perspective. And though the night still held more trials, more eyes, more whispers, I straightened my posture, lifted the tray once more, and whispered to myself, let them think I'm no one, until they learn who I really am. When I walked back into the ballroom, the atmosphere had shifted. The night had grown louder and drunker. The soft elegance of earlier hours had melted into something messier, bolder. Champagne overflowed. Laughter cracked like glass against the marble walls. Vanessa Hale was at the center of it all. She had claimed the dance floor like a queen on her throne, surrounded by admirers, men drawn to her glittering confidence, women orbiting her just to be seen in her glow. Her red gown shimmered like liquid fire, every move calculated, every smile a performance. I kept my head down, weaving quietly between the guests with my tray of empty glasses. I was invisible again, and that suited me fine, until she noticed me. Her laughter stopped. Her sharp, amused eyes locked onto me as if spotting prey. "Hey, maid!" she called, her voice cutting through the music. The band faltered for a beat. Heads turned. "One of the tables hasn't been cleared," she continued, loud enough for everyone nearby to hear. "Go do your job instead of standing there staring." The room froze for a fraction of a second, just long enough for the embarrassment to burn. Then came the laughter. Short, cruel, nervous. Every eye in the room turned toward me, the silent servant who had somehow interrupted their fun. For a moment, I felt it, that old, familiar sting. The one that reached deep, whispering, "You don't belong here." But then something else rose inside me. Calm, cool, unshakable. I straightened the tray in my hands, met her gaze, and let a small, serene smile touch my lips. "Of course, ma'am," I said softly. My voice didn't tremble. And then I turned and walked away. The laughter followed me only for a few seconds before it scattered into other noise, but I didn't hear it anymore. Inside, my heartbeat was steady, my pride intact. Because I knew something Vanessa didn't. Tomorrow, the same ballroom would host a press conference. Cameras, reporters, spotlights, and she, like everyone else, would be there smiling, posing, desperate to stay close to Daniel Cross. And when Daniel introduced me not as a maid, not as a servant, but as his wife, Amelia Cross, co-chair of the foundation and owner of half this estate, that same laughter that echoed tonight would die in their throats. No shouting, no revenge, just the truth unveiled in front of everyone who had thought they were better. I could already imagine the look in her eyes when she realized the woman she humiliated was the very one whose generosity funded this entire evening. That thought didn't fill me with spite. It filled me with peace. Because true power, I realized, isn't in making someone small. It's in staying gracious when they try to. And that night, as I carried my tray past the chandeliers and the smirking guests, I whispered under my breath, "Tomorrow, the masks fall." Back upstairs, Daniel watched everything unfold from his study. The soft glow from the monitors lit his face as the ballroom filled his screen, laughter, music, vanity, and all. But his gaze wasn't on the guests. It was on me. He had been watching quietly, ever since I descended the stairs disguised as a maid. Not because he doubted me, but because he wanted to understand the world through my eyes, the truth I had gone looking for. When Vanessa's little scene played out, his jaw tightened. He saw her laughter, the way others joined in, the subtle cruelty that rippled through the room like perfume. For a moment, his fingers curled into fists. But then he saw it, my composure, the way I bowed, smiled, and walked away with grace instead of anger. That was when his expression changed. The tension in his shoulders eased, and a small, knowing smile formed. He leaned back in his chair, whispering under his breath, "You're stronger than they'll ever be." Because he knew me, my heart, my purpose, my quiet power. He had seen me weather storms far greater than mockery. Reaching for his phone, he typed one message to his assistant, short and precise. "Prepare the announcement. The real hostess deserves her crown." And that was it. A single text that would rewrite the entire evening. Below, the laughter continued, unaware that the stage was being reset, that every cruel word and fake smile would soon stand in the light of truth. Daniel rose from his chair, straightened his cufflinks, and glanced once more at the screen. I was still there, still calm, still graceful, completely unaware that my quiet endurance had just changed the night's course. The gala that began as a test was about to become a revelation. And when the truth came out, it wouldn't just expose them, it would crown me. The mansion glowed that night, golden chandeliers reflected off marble floors, laughter shimmered in the air like bubbles from the champagne. Every powerful family in the city had come. The Cross Gala wasn't just an event, it was a statement. It said status, prestige, power. And yet, as I stood among them, invisible in my maid's uniform, I felt like I was standing on the edge of two worlds, one glittering with diamonds, and one grounded in truth. The guests floated past me, perfume and pride swirling in their wake. Conversations sparkled with false flattery. The orchestra played soft jazz, the kind that made people feel more important than they were. Then I saw her, Vanessa Hale. Even before she turned, I knew who she was. The whispers had reached me long before tonight. Her name was always followed by something: famous fashion CEO, newly divorced, stunningly rich, rumored to be after Daniel Cross. And there she was, tall, flawless, and utterly aware of the effect she had on the room. Her gown was crimson deep, dangerous red that caught every light like fire. It clung perfectly to her figure, diamonds dripping from her ears, wrists, and even the hairpin holding her glossy curls. Every man turned to look at her. Every woman looked away, pretending not to. She was beauty and arrogance stitched together. And she was staring right at me. At first, it was confusion, that tiny flicker of surprise when her eyes landed on someone she didn't recognize. Then, disdain. The kind that doesn't need words, just a lift of the chin and a curl of the lip. I lowered my gaze, stepping aside to pass with my tray. I'd done nothing to offend her, I hadn't even spoken. But in her eyes, my plain black uniform was already an offense. Then it came. "Hey, you!" Her voice cut through the music, sharp, commanding. The kind of voice that expected the world to stop when she spoke. I turned, keeping my expression calm. "Yes, ma'am?" Her hand rested on her hip, manicured fingers gleaming with red polish. "You're walking too close to me. Watch that cheap uniform, you might stain my dress." A few nearby guests paused, half smiles playing on their lips. They were entertained. "I'm sorry, ma'am," I said softly. She blinked once, then smirked. "Sorry?" She tilted her head, letting out a soft laugh. "You shouldn't even be here. Dishes need washing. Go do something useful." Laughter rippled from her little circle, light and cruel. My cheeks burned, but I said nothing. I bowed slightly and turned toward the kitchen, her chuckle following me like a shadow. Inside the kitchen, the noise of the ballroom faded into a muffled blur. The scent of roasted truffle and champagne sauce filled the air. Chefs rushed about, plates clattered, and yet, for a moment, the chaos felt comforting. Real. Honest. I leaned against the counter, taking a slow breath. My reflection in the steel refrigerator door looked small, a woman stripped of status, swallowed by pretense. But under that humility, a quiet fire burned. Because Vanessa Hale didn't know who I was. She didn't know the maid she just humiliated was the owner of the mansion she stood in. And that, I thought, was the beauty of disguise. It revealed truth faster than power ever could. "Amelia?" The voice came from behind. It was Marcia, one of the real maids, her eyes wide. "Are you okay?" I smiled faintly. "I'm fine." "She shouldn't have talked to you like that," Marcia muttered. "She's been snapping at everyone. Called the florist incompetent, told the chef the dessert was too sweet, even complained the champagne wasn't cold enough." I chuckled softly. "Let her. People show who they are when they think no one's watching." Marcia frowned. "But aren't you watching?" I looked at her, and for a second I almost told her everything. Almost. But I didn't, not yet. "Just keep doing your job," I said gently. "Sometimes silence teaches louder than words." She nodded slowly, though confusion still clouded her eyes. A few minutes later, I stepped back into the ballroom, tray in hand. The crowd had grown thicker, the music louder, the laughter brighter. But under all that glitter, the air was different now. Heavier. The kind of atmosphere that hides tension behind smiles. Daniel stood across the room, deep in conversation with a group of investors. Even from here, I could see the ease in his posture, the quiet authority in his gestures. He looked up once, and our eyes met for a fraction of a second. That single look said everything. I see you. I know what happened. Stay calm. I nodded subtly, pretending to adjust my tray. Then I noticed Vanessa again. She was laughing loud, confident, the center of attention. The men around her leaned in, their admiration obvious. She thrived on it. She was aflame, and they were moths. But her laughter stopped when Daniel walked past. Her gaze followed him, hungry and calculating. And then, without missing a beat, she smoothed her gown and began to move toward him. I followed quietly, pretending to refill glasses along the way. She reached him near the grand staircase. "Mr. Cross," she said sweetly, voice dripping with charm. That speech earlier truly inspiring. Daniel smiled politely. "Thank you, Vanessa. I appreciate that." "I'd love to collaborate sometime," she continued. "Perhaps over dinner?" Her tone was soft, but her eyes were bold, the kind of look meant to invite curiosity. I nearly laughed. Daniel glanced at me a brief flicker, gone in an instant before replying, "Perhaps. My wife and I will think about it." Vanessa blinked, caught off guard. "Oh, of course," she said quickly, recovering with a strained smile. "Your wife must be wonderful. I can't wait to meet her." "You will," he said calmly, "soon." Then he excused himself, leaving her standing there, lips pressed together, eyes burning with something between envy and confusion. She turned and found me still nearby, her gaze narrowed. "What are you staring at?" she hissed. "Nothing, ma'am," I said softly, bowing again. Her eyes raked over me. "You really don't know your place, do you?" I smiled faintly. "I think I do." Her brows furrowed as if trying to decide whether I was being humble or clever. Before she could respond, a waiter called her name, drawing her back into the crowd. Hours passed. The party deepened. Laughter became louder, more careless. Champagne overflowed, secrets slipped. Vanessa remained the star, always at the center, always seen. But the more she spoke, the more I saw. Beneath her glamour was a woman desperately trying to prove she belonged by making others feel small. Every insult, every sneer, every fake compliment was a performance, and I was her unwilling audience. Around midnight, Daniel took the stage again to thank the guests. Applause filled the hall. Cameras flashed. I stood near the back, tray in hand, watching. He spoke about generosity, integrity, kindness, the very virtues the room pretended to possess. But when he said, "True wealth is measured not by what you have, but by how you treat those who have less," the crowd applauded like it was poetry. Vanessa clapped, smiling widely, completely unaware that her hypocrisy was being exposed in real time. And then Daniel said something that made my heart still. "Tomorrow," he announced, "the Cross Foundation will reveal its new co-chair, someone who has quietly shaped every decision we've made for the past 5 years. A woman of vision, compassion, and grace." Gasps rippled through the audience. Vanessa's smile faltered for a moment. "She's here tonight," Daniel continued, scanning the room. "Though perhaps not as you expect." The room buzzed with whispers. People turned, curious. Vanessa frowned. "Who is he talking about?" she asked the man beside her. I said nothing. Inside, I felt the slow spark of anticipation. Tomorrow the masks would fall. Later that night, when the guests began leaving, Vanessa crossed paths with me again near the entrance. Her voice was softer this time, though her words were still sharp. "Next time, learn your place before you attend a real event," she said, adjusting her fur wrap. I bowed slightly. "Good night, ma'am." She gave a faint smirk. "I doubt we'll ever meet again." And with that, she swept past me head high, ego higher. I watched her go, a strange calm settling over me. Because she was right. The next time she saw me, she wouldn't recognize me at all. That night, as the lights dimmed and the last car rolled down the driveway, I returned to my room, removed the maid's uniform, and stood before the mirror. The woman staring back wasn't the same one who had walked downstairs hours ago. I had seen the truth not just of others, but of myself. And as I reached for my wedding ring, sliding it back onto my finger, I whispered, "Tomorrow let them see." Because what began as a disguise would end as a revelation. Upstairs, Daniel watched everything through the security feed. The ballroom filled his screen gold lights, swirling gowns, crystal reflections, and in the middle of it all, me. He watched as Vanessa Hale tilted her chin, eyes sharp as glass, her red gown glinting like fire under the chandeliers. He saw her laughter, the pointing, the smug delight as the crowd joined in. And then he saw me silent, calm, dignified, not fighting back. His jaw tightened, eyes darkening. For a moment, his hand hovered near the desk, caught between fury and admiration. Then slowly, he exhaled, and a knowing smile curved his lips. He turned to his assistant, James, standing near the door. "Tell the staff to prepare the announcement," Daniel said quietly. His voice was calm, but his eyes burned. James blinked. "Now, sir?" Daniel's gaze never left the screen. "Now. The Queen deserves her throne." James nodded, already moving. Downstairs, the night was at its peak. The orchestra played louder, the chatter thicker, the laughter wilder. The air smelled of money and champagne, and just beneath it, ego. Vanessa was still glowing at the center, like she owned the place. She didn't notice the soft shift that began to ripple through the room. The band stopped mid-song. The waiters paused mid-step. Then the lights dimmed. At first, guests murmured, confused. A few laughed nervously, thinking it part of the entertainment. Then the orchestra fell completely silent. A hush rippled across the ballroom like a wave. The microphone on the stage crackled to life. "Ladies and gentlemen," the host's voice boomed through the speakers, smooth and commanding. "We have a special moment tonight, an introduction long overdue." Vanessa frowned, glancing around. "What's going on?" she muttered to the woman beside her. The woman shrugged. "No idea. Maybe another speech." The host continued. "Tonight's gala has been about generosity, honor, and integrity. But every great evening deserves a moment of truth." He paused. The silence stretched thick and expectant. "And now," he said slowly, "please welcome our mysterious guest of honor, the one this entire mansion belongs to." Gasps swept through the crowd. Heads turned. Whispers rose. Vanessa's eyes widened. "Wait, the mansion owner's here?" Someone near her whispered, "You think it's Daniel's business partner?" "No," said another voice. "They said her." Her brows knit. "Her?" I was still near the far end of the ballroom, standing beside the bar, tray in hand. Every gaze in the room began to scan, searching for this mysterious she. I could feel my heart begin to drum, not from fear, but from anticipation. And then, from the corner of my eye, I saw Daniel step onto the stage. He didn't need a microphone to command silence, but he took one anyway. The spotlight hit him, turning his black tuxedo into shadow and silver. "Good evening, everyone," he began, his voice smooth, steady, echoing through the vast hall. "I hope you've enjoyed the night so far." A few polite chuckles, a few murmured agreements. He smiled faintly. "You've dined, danced, laughed, perhaps even judged." The room tensed. Vanessa's expression flickered. She forced a laugh. Daniel's gaze swept the crowd. "But tonight isn't just about charity or wealth. It's about something deeper, something we often forget when surrounded by gold." He paused. "Character." The word dropped like a stone. In the silence that followed, I took a step forward. Then another. Slowly, deliberately, Daniel continued. "For the past hour, you've all been in the company of someone extraordinary, someone who chose humility when she could have chosen pride. Someone who wore simplicity to reveal sincerity." His eyes found me across the room, our gaze locked. And I knew it was time. Daniel extended his hand toward the crowd. "Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome the real hostess of tonight's gala, my wife, Mrs. Amelia Cross." The sound that followed wasn't applause, not yet. It was shock. Gasps, murmurs, sharp intakes of breath. Heads whipped toward me as I stepped forward, setting the tray down gently on the bar. My hands didn't shake. My back was straight, my face serene. Vanessa turned, her eyes widening as recognition dawned. "You?" she breathed. I smiled faintly. "Yes, me." The crowd parted as I walked, the hem of my plain uniform brushing against their designer shoes. Each step echoed, soft, deliberate, powerful. Some guests lowered their eyes, shame flickering across their faces. Others whispered furiously, piecing together the truth. Vanessa just stood frozen, her red gown glimmering under the lights that now seemed too harsh. Daniel met me halfway. He reached for my hand, not the hand of a servant, but of a queen. And in that simple gesture, every lie in the room crumbled. He lifted my hand to his lips. "You did beautifully," he whispered. The microphone caught it, sending his words echoing softly through the speakers. The room erupted not in cheers, but in gasps, guilt, disbelief. Vanessa's voice cut through, trembling. "This is some kind of joke, right?" Daniel turned to her slowly, his expression unreadable. "A joke?" She forced a laugh. She's a maid. I saw her. She was clearing tables." "She was watching," Daniel said calmly. "Watching how people treated others when they thought no one was watching them." Vanessa blinked rapidly, her face draining of color. He stepped closer, his voice steady, but cold. "And you, Miss Hale, showed everyone exactly who you are." The room fell silent again. All eyes were on her now, the woman in red, suddenly very small under the weight of 1,000 stares. She tried to speak, but the words tangled. I didn't know." "That's the point," I said softly. Her eyes snapped to mine. I took a step closer. "You didn't know who I was. You just knew who you thought I wasn't." Her lips parted, but no sound came. "True kindness," I continued, "isn't shown to people we think matter. It's shown to everyone." For a moment, the entire room seemed to hold its breath. Then, somewhere in the back, someone began to clap. Slow, hesitant. Then another joined, then another, until the entire ballroom filled with applause, not polite, but earnest. Vanessa stood motionless, eyes glistening, mascara smudging as realization hit her like a slow, cruel tide. Daniel's arm slipped gently around my waist as the crowd cheered. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said into the microphone, his voice warm again, "my wife, the true heart of the Cross Foundation." Later that night, after the crowd had dispersed, the mansion was quiet again. The chandeliers dimmed to a soft, golden glow. I stood at the balcony overlooking the gardens, the same place where this plan had been born. The night air was cool, and the city shimmered below. Daniel joined me, 2 glasses of wine in hand. He passed one to me. "To the lesson," he said softly. I smiled. "And to the truth." He looked at me, really looked, and said, "You handled it better than I ever could have." I laughed lightly. "You wanted to storm down there, didn't you?" He smirked. "Maybe. But watching you handle it with grace, that was better than any confrontation." I sipped my wine, feeling the calm settle in my chest. "She'll remember this night," I said quietly. "They all will," he replied. "Not because of humiliation, but because they saw something rare. Dignity." We stood in silence for a while, the wind brushing softly against our faces. Then I asked, "Do you think it changed anything?" He thought for a moment. "Maybe not the world," he said. "But it reminded everyone in that room that money can buy a stage, not respect." I smiled, tracing the rim of my glass. "And what about you, Mr. Cross?" He turned to me, eyes glinting. "Me? I'm just proud I married the bravest woman in the room." The next morning, news outlets buzzed with photos of the gala. Headlines blared. "The maid was the billionaire's wife society gala shaken by hidden identity." Humility test at the Cross Mansion goes viral. Woman in red silenced by the real queen. Vanessa's PR team went silent. Her name trended, but not for her brand, for her arrogance. But I didn't celebrate her downfall, because the lesson wasn't for her alone. It was for everyone who forgot that titles fade, but character doesn't. That afternoon, I walked through the now empty ballroom. The roses had wilted slightly, the champagne glasses half empty, but the air felt lighter, somehow purified by truth. Marcia, the maid, saw me and froze mid-step. "Mrs. Cross?" she whispered. I smiled. "Yes." Her eyes widened. You were the one?" "Yes," I said gently. "And you, my dear, treated me with kindness when you didn't have to. That says more about you than any title ever could." Tears welled in her eyes. "Thank you, ma'am." I reached out, touching her hand lightly. "No, thank you." As I left the hall, I caught my reflection in the grand mirror by the staircase, no uniform this time, just myself. I realized something profound. The test hadn't just revealed others, it had revealed me. Because power isn't proven by how loudly we demand respect. It's shown by how quietly we keep our grace. And that night, under the golden glow of the chandeliers, I had learned the truest lesson of all. When you walk in humility, even your silence speaks louder than their applause. The room was alive with noise, laughter, chatter, the rhythmic hum of a string quartet blending with the clinking of glasses. It was the kind of night that glittered on the surface but cracked beneath the weight of pretense. Then, all at once, the music stopped. The crowd hushed, glancing around in confusion. At the top of the grand staircase, under the shimmering chandelier, Daniel appeared. He descended one slow step at a time, the glow of the golden lights tracing the edge of his tuxedo. His expression was unreadable calm, confident, but with a quiet intensity that demanded silence. Every whisper died. Even Vanessa, radiant in her red gown, surrounded by admirers, faltered mid-laugh, her smile freezing. Daniel reached the center landing, his voice smooth but commanding as it carried across the ballroom. "Before I continue," he began, "I want to thank the woman who made tonight possible." The audience straightened. Murmurs rippled. He continued, "She's humble, graceful, and far kinder than most of you here tonight." The words sliced through the air like a velvet blade. He gestured toward the kitchen, deliberate, slow, sure. "My wife," he said clearly, "Amelia Cross." The world seemed to stop. Gasps erupted, echoing like thunder against the marble walls. Every eye turned toward the doorway by the kitchen, and there I was. Still in my maid's uniform. The tray I had just set down gleamed dully in the dim light. For a heartbeat, no one moved. No one spoke. The entire room seemed to hold its breath. Vanessa's face drained of color. I could almost hear her thoughts, the disbelief, the panic, the desperate need to rewrite what she had just done. Daniel began walking toward me, his polished shoes clicking against the marble floor. The crowd parted for him as though gravity itself shifted in his favor. Every step he took echoed like a promise. When he reached me, he didn't hesitate. He took my hand, lifted it to his lips, and pressed a kiss to my knuckles. The room gasped again, but softer this time, not from shock, from awe. Then, still holding my hand, Daniel turned back to the microphone. "You may have mistaken her for a maid," he said, voice steady and rich, "but she's the reason I'm the man I am today." Applause erupted, startled, genuine, rising like a storm breaking. Some clapped too late, embarrassed. Others clapped too loudly, trying to drown their own guilt. I could see Vanessa's red lips part in disbelief, her perfect posture faltering. Her admirers, moments ago laughing at her jokes, now shifted awkwardly away. Daniel's voice carried again, smooth as silk but sharp enough to cut. "You see," he said, "humility doesn't wear a price tag. Grace doesn't need a title. And kindness, real kindness, doesn't check your worth before offering a smile." He turned to look at me, warmth in his eyes. "My wife understands that better than anyone." I met his gaze, the weight of 100 moments between us, trust, respect, partnership, all shining in that quiet space between words. He faced the crowd once more. Tonight wasn't about wealth. It was about seeing beyond it. The guests glanced at one another, uncomfortable, ashamed, exposed. Then Daniel looked directly at Vanessa. "And some of you," he said softly, "failed the test." Vanessa blinked rapidly, her face pale beneath her makeup. "Daniel," she started, forcing a brittle smile. "I didn't know." "That's exactly the point," he interrupted gently. "You didn't know, and you didn't care." Her mouth opened, then closed. The silence around her thickened. Daniel handed the microphone to the host, who wisely stepped back, giving the moment room to breathe. I took a small step forward, my voice calm. "Miss Hale," I said softly, "tonight wasn't meant to shame you." Her eyes flickered toward mine, hopeful, desperate. "It was meant to remind all of us," I continued, "that we reveal our true selves not when we speak to those above us, but when we think no one important is watching." A murmur ran through the crowd. Some nodded slowly. Others dropped their eyes. Vanessa swallowed hard, tears welling as the truth settled like a mirror before her. Daniel looked at me with a kind of quiet pride that made my heart ache. Then he turned back to the microphone. "I built this mansion," he said, "but she built me. Her strength, her patience, her kindness, that's what true wealth looks like." He looked at the audience, sweeping the room with his gaze. "And if tonight made any of you uncomfortable, maybe that's good. Maybe it's time we all ask ourselves who we become when no one's watching." Applause broke again, hesitant at first, then stronger, until it filled the room with sound and emotion. Vanessa bowed her head, her hands trembling. She whispered something I couldn't hear, maybe, "I'm sorry," maybe nothing at all. Daniel squeezed my hand, and we turned to walk toward the staircase together. But just as we did, Vanessa's voice broke through. Wait! The room fell silent again. She took a few unsteady steps toward us, her heels clacking against the marble. Her voice wavered. I truly didn't know. I thought that I was beneath you, I asked gently. Her eyes filled with tears. Yes, and I was wrong. Daniel nodded. Then perhaps you've already learned the most important lesson of tonight. He turned slightly toward her, his tone soft but final. You wanted her to wash dishes? Then remember, humility is the rarest jewel in any room. A deep silence followed, not of awkwardness, but of reflection. You could almost hear the shame in the air, the soft realization dawning on the faces of those who had joined in Vanessa's laughter earlier. The orchestra began to play again, slowly at first, a soft emotional melody that carried through the space like forgiveness. I turned to Daniel, our fingers intertwined. He smiled down at me. Are you ready to leave, my love? I nodded. More than ready. We walked toward the exit, the crowd instinctively parting like waves before a ship. Some reached out to touch my arm as I passed small gestures of apology. Others simply whispered, I'm sorry, or you taught us something tonight. But I didn't gloat, I didn't need to. The quiet grace of truth was more powerful than any revenge. Outside, the night air was cool against my skin. The stars above shimmered like diamonds scattered across velvet. Daniel opened the door to the car, but I paused on the steps, looking back at the glowing mansion, the same one where I'd been humiliated hours earlier. Do you regret it? Daniel asked softly. I smiled faintly. Not at all. Sometimes people need to see what humility looks like so they can recognize its absence. He tilted his head, studying me. You handled it better than I ever could have. I laughed quietly. Oh, I know. You wanted to come down there the second she called me a maid. He chuckled, slipping an arm around my shoulders. You have no idea how hard it was not to. We stood there in silence for a moment, listening to the distant hum of the city, the faint echo of music still drifting from inside. Then Daniel said something that stayed with me. You didn't just teach Vanessa a lesson, he said. You reminded everyone, including me, what real power looks like. The next morning, the story had already spread. Every news outlet carried it. Mystery maid turns out to be billionaire's wife. The cross-gala revelation shocks high society. Photos of Daniel kissing my hand filled every social feed. Captions like "Humility wins the night" trending worldwide. Some called it poetic, others called it justice. Vanessa's publicist released a statement and apology, polished but sincere enough. She withdrew from 2 upcoming brand events for reflection. But the part that mattered most wasn't the headlines or the gossip. It was the quiet message that followed the emails, the handwritten letters from people I'd never met. Thank you for reminding us to stay kind. My daughter watched your story. She said she wants to be like you. Grace over pride, always. Those words mattered more than applause. A week later, Daniel hosted a smaller dinner, not a gala, not for show, but for family and staff, the people who truly mattered. I wore the same simple dress I'd worn that night beneath the maid's apron. When Vanessa's name came up in conversation, Daniel only said, sometimes humility comes wrapped in red regret. Everyone laughed softly, not cruelly, but knowingly. As the night carried on, I found myself standing at the same balcony again, the wind playing gently with my hair. Daniel joined me, slipping a hand into mine. Do you think she learned? I asked. He thought for a long moment. Maybe not yet, but she'll never forget. I smiled. Neither will they. He looked at me, eyes full of that same admiration that made everything else fade away. That's because you didn't just wear grace, Amelia. You lived it. The lesson lingered long after the night ended. Because in a world obsessed with status, one act of quiet dignity can shake every glittering illusion to its core. And when they remember the night of the Cross Gala, they won't remember the jewels, the laughter, or the red gown. They'll remember the moment a billionaire's wife disguised as a maid taught the world that true royalty doesn't need a crown. After the reveal, the ballroom had gone eerily quiet. For a moment, no one moved, not even Vanessa. The woman in red, once the center of attention, now stood frozen among marble pillars and chandeliers. Her flawless confidence had melted away, leaving only raw disbelief in its place. I turned toward her, my heart unexpectedly soft. She looked so small now, stripped of her armor of pride and diamonds. It's okay, I said gently, breaking the silence. Sometimes life humbles us so we can learn to be kind. Her breath hitched. She blinked rapidly, as if holding back tears. Around her, the same guests who once laughed at her cruelty now looked away, shame painting their faces. For the first time that night, Vanessa lowered her head. Daniel stepped closer, his arm brushing mine. "Shall we?" he murmured, offering his hand. I nodded, letting him guide me through the still stunned crowd. Every step we took seemed to echo louder than music. People moved aside with quiet respect, not because of wealth or title, but because they'd just witnessed something rare. Humility met with grace instead of vengeance. At the base of the staircase, I paused and looked back one last time. Vanessa stood alone now. The laughter that once orbited her had vanished. Only the hum of whispered reflections filled the air. And then softly she whispered, "I'm sorry." I gave her a small smile. "Then you've already begun to change." It wasn't triumph, I felt it was peace. That night, after Daniel's speech resumed, something remarkable happened. People began to give not for attention, not for reputation, but from something genuine. The donation box overflowed faster than anyone expected. Checks were written quietly. Anonymous gifts poured in. The Cross Foundation's charity gala raised double its goal. But when guests left, they weren't talking about the mansion, or the caviar, or the orchestra. They were talking about the maid who turned out to be the billionaire's wife. The woman who chose forgiveness when she could have chosen revenge. The one who taught a lesson without ever raising her voice. That night wasn't about luxury anymore. It became a story one whispered, retold, and remembered long after the lights dimmed. When the last guest departed, I walked barefoot across the empty ballroom, the cool marble soothing against my feet. The chandeliers still glowed softly, reflecting in the mirrored walls like ghosts of the evening's illusions. Daniel was by the fireplace removing his cufflinks. He looked up as I approached. "You were extraordinary tonight," he said. I smiled faintly. "I wasn't trying to be." He tilted his head. "That's what made it real." I sat beside him, the fire's warmth flickering across his face. For a while, we said nothing, just listened to the quiet hum of the night. Finally, he spoke again. "You know, I almost stopped the reveal when I saw how they treated you. It took everything in me not to walk downstairs." I glanced at him, amused. "You wanted to storm in and save me, didn't you?" He smiled sheepishly. "Every second." I rested my head on his shoulder. "You did save me, Daniel. Not by stopping it, but by letting me finish it my way." He turned slightly to look at me. "And you showed them something they'll never forget." I thought about Vanessa then, the look in her eyes when her pride cracked. Not out of fear, but realization. Maybe this was how grace worked. Quiet, disarming, and deeply human. The next morning, the story broke everywhere. Mystery maid turns out to be billionaire's wife. Amelia Cross teaches high society a lesson in humility. The headlines glimmered across screens like wildfire. Photos from the Gala me in that simple black uniform beside Daniel became symbols of quiet power. My inbox flooded with messages. People from every corner of the world wrote things like, "Thank you for reminding us that kindness still matters. You could have humiliated her, but you didn't. That's what makes you unforgettable." This story made me rethink how I treat others. For every cruel word I'd endured that night, 1,000 kind ones replaced it. And somewhere deep down, I knew the gala had become something bigger than a party. It had become a mirror showing people who they were and who they could still be. 3 days later, as sunlight poured into the drawing room, my housekeeper entered with a small note. "Mrs. Cross," she said softly, "there's someone here to see you." I frowned. "Who is it?" She hesitated. "Miss Vanessa Hale." I looked toward the door, surprised. Part of me had expected this moment, the other part wasn't sure how I felt about it. "Let her in," I said quietly. A moment later, Vanessa entered, no longer wrapped in red silk or diamonds. She wore a simple beige dress, her hair tied back, her face bare. It was as if the woman who had once lived for appearances had shed her old skin. "Mrs. Cross," she began softly, her voice trembling. "I wanted to apologize properly." I gestured for her to sit. "You don't have to—" "Yes," she interrupted. "I do." Her hands twisted in her lap. "I judged you. I mocked you. I thought I was better because of what I wore, who I knew, and I couldn't have been more wrong." I watched her quietly. "Why the change of heart?" She looked up, eyes glassy. "Because when you had the chance to humiliate me, you didn't. You gave me something I didn't deserve, mercy, and that's something I'll never forget." For a long moment, we sat in silence. Then I smiled faintly. "Vanessa, Life has a way of showing us who we really are usually when it hurts the most. What matters isn't what we do when we're adored. It's what we do when we're exposed. She nodded, her throat tight. I want to do better. I want to be better. I leaned forward, my tone soft. Then start by being kind to someone who can't repay you. That's where it begins. A tear rolled down her cheek. Thank you for not being like me. I shook my head. No, Vanessa. Thank you for being honest enough to change. She stood, smoothing her dress, then hesitated. Do you really forgive me? I smiled. I already did the moment you looked down instead of away. After she left, I stood by the window watching her car disappear down the long driveway. The world outside looked different, somehow brighter, quieter, more alive. Daniel walked in behind me, slipping his arms around my waist. I saw her leave. How did it go? She apologized, I said softly. Truly apologized. He nodded. And you forgave her. I did? He pressed his chin lightly to my shoulder. You always find a way to turn pain into grace. I smiled. That's because grace isn't about who deserves it, Daniel. It's about who needs it. He kissed the top of my head. That's why they'll never forget you. Weeks passed. The Gala story still floated through headlines, documentaries, and podcasts. People debated the meaning behind it. Was it a test of pride? Was it planned? Was it love? But none of that mattered to me. What mattered was the ripple it caused. The Cross Foundation received record donations that month, not from the wealthy elite, but from ordinary people. Teachers, nurses, factory workers. Notes arrived attached to small checks and crumpled bills. I don't have much, but I wanted to give. This is from my students. We watched your story in class. Because kindness is contagious. Every message reminded me why we started in the first place. One evening, Daniel and I hosted a dinner, not a gala this time, just close friends, staff, and family. Laughter filled the dining room, soft and genuine. No one dressed to impress, no cameras, no press, just connection. As I poured wine into glasses, I noticed the maid, a young woman named Clara, drop a dish. It shattered across the floor. She froze, face pale. I'm so sorry, Mrs. Croce. I smiled gently. It's fine, Clara, it's just glass. Her eyes widened. You're not mad? Of course not. We all break something once in a while. The table fell quiet for a moment, the kind of silence that comes from understanding rather than shock. And in that small, ordinary act, the lesson lived on. Later that night, I returned to the same balcony where this story began, where I'd first told Daniel I wanted to see people's true hearts. The city lights twinkled below like scattered stars. Daniel joined me, wrapping a shawl around my shoulders. Still thinking about that night? He asked. Always, I said softly. It changed me too. How so? I turned to him, my eyes reflecting the skyline. I realized something. You can't teach grace through power. You can only show it through humility. He smiled knowingly. And you did. I leaned against him. No, we did. You let me live my truth. He kissed my temple. You showed them what real royalty looks like. I laughed quietly. Royalty? Yes, he said. The kind that doesn't need a crown because it already wears compassion. As the wind whispered through the garden below, I looked out at the horizon and whispered to myself, grace isn't weakness, it's strength dressed in kindness. And in that moment, I finally understood. True power doesn't roar. It forgives. It restores. It endures. The night of the gala would forever be remembered not for the wealth that glittered, but for the humility that glowed brighter than gold. And long after the world forgot the headlines, they would remember one woman's quiet words that night. Sometimes life humbles us, so we can learn to be kind. Before you scroll away, let me ask you this. Have you ever judged someone by what they wore, how they looked, or where they worked only to realize later they were far more than you imagined? Sometimes life uses the humble to teach the mighty. Sometimes the ones we overlook are the very souls carrying lessons we didn't know we needed. If this story touched your heart, remind someone today kindness costs nothing, but it changes everything. Don't forget to subscribe for more stories that awaken your heart, challenge your thoughts, and remind you that grace is still powerful. Drop a comment below. What would you have done if you were in Amelia's shoes?